She stepped off the train into a blizzard, and her heart sank. This was not her stop. This was not her future. The man waiting to marry her was 200 miles away, and the next train would not come for 3 days. No money, no shelter, no one waiting. Just snow, silence, and a mistake that should have destroyed her. But then a stranger appeared, a broken widower with grief carved into his face. And beside him a blind little boy who whispered 4 words that changed everything. I prayed for you. What happens when your biggest mistake leads you exactly where you were meant to be? What happens when a child's faith is stronger than a grown man's fear? And what happens when love finds you at the wrong station? This is not just a love story. This is a story about healing, about second chances, about the miracles hiding inside our worst moments. Stay until the end, because the final chapter will remind you why getting lost is sometimes the only way to find your way home. This story teaches us that our plans are not always God's plans. Sometimes the doors that close, the trains we miss, the mistakes we make, they are not punishments. They are redirections. If you have ever felt lost, abandoned, or afraid that your best days are behind you, this story is your reminder that grace finds us in the most unexpected places. If this message touched your heart, leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had a wrong station moment that turned into a blessing? Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that could change your perspective on life. Now, let us begin. Catherine Moore stepped down from the train before she could stop herself. Her boot hit the frozen wooden platform with a hollow thud. The train lurched once, then pulled away, its whistle cutting through her chest like a blade. She stood there watching the last car disappear into the swirling snow. The letter in her hand trembled. This was not the place written there. This was not Silver Falls. This was not the future she had promised herself. Snow swallowed the tracks as the train vanished into the white horizon. Catherine stood alone on the platform, breath shallow, heart racing. She had just lost the only road she thought would save her. The station sign behind her read Whitmore in chipped black paint, a place she had never meant to see, a place no one had ever told her about. She pulled her thin coat tighter, though it did nothing against the cold seeping through bone and memory. Her carpet bag rested at her feet, its handle worn smooth from a journey that had already taken too much from her. Catherine unfolded the letter again with shaking fingers. Silver Falls. That was where she was supposed to be. That was where a man named Henry Dawson was waiting to make her his bride. A man she had never met. A man who was supposed to save her from the shame of being 26 years old with nothing to her name. But Silver Falls was not here. She looked around the empty platform. Wind howled through the gaps in the wooden walls. Snow piled against the corners like white ghosts settling in for winter. There was no ticket booth, no station master, no one at all. Her stomach sank as the truth settled over her. The next train would not come until after Christmas. 3 days away. 3 days with no money, no shelter, and no one waiting for her. She swallowed hard and stared down the long, empty road stretching south into nothing but white. Lord, she whispered, what have I done? The wind answered with silence. Catherine picked up her bag and walked toward the edge of the platform. Maybe there was a town nearby. Maybe someone would take pity on a woman foolish enough to step off at the wrong station. She had survived worse. She had survived her father's death. She had survived her mother's illness. She had survived selling everything they owned just to afford this one train ticket to a new life. She would survive this too. Ma'am? Catherine turned sharply at the voice. A man stood near a freight wagon pulled off to the side of the road. He was tall and broad, shoulders bowed beneath a heavy coat worn thin at the elbows. His face was stern, not unkind but guarded, like kindness had once cost him too much. Beside him stood a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The child held the man's hand lightly, his head tilted to one side. His eyes were unfocused in a way Catherine recognized with a sudden ache in her chest. The boy was blind. "You waiting on someone?" the man asked. His voice was polite but distant. Catherine lifted her chin, forcing strength into her voice. "I made a mistake. I got off at the wrong station." The boy's face brightened immediately. "Are you lost?" he asked eagerly. Something in his voice made Catherine's heart clench. She managed a small smile, even though he could not see it. "I suppose I am, sweetheart." The man's jaw tightened at her gentle tone. "Next train's not until the 26th, he said flatly. "Town's 4 miles south, but everything's closed for Christmas Eve." Snow began to fall harder now, soft but relentless. The boy shivered despite his thick wool coat. Catherine pulled her shawl closer. She had nowhere to go, no money for a room even if there was one, no way to get to Silver Falls before the man waiting there gave up on her. "Papa," the child said quietly, turning his face toward Catherine's voice. "She sounds warm." The man went completely still. "Like Mama did," the boy added softly. "Like fresh bread coming out of the oven." Something passed over the man's face. Pain, longing, fear. Then it vanished, locked away behind a practiced control. "Samuel," he said sharply, "that is enough." But the boy reached out anyway, small hands searching the air. Catherine stepped forward without thinking and let him touch her sleeve. His fingers were gentle, curious. "You feel kind," Samuel said simply. Catherine's throat tightened. She had never met a child like this. So open, so trusting, so willing to believe in a stranger. The man watched this exchange with hard eyes. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. "I am Jacob Hale," he said reluctantly. "Hale Ranch is 5 miles west of here. My housekeeper left to visit family for the holiday. I need help. Cooking, basic chores, 2 days. I will pay your train fare north after Christmas." It was not charity. Catherine heard that clearly in his voice. It was an exchange, dignity wrapped in necessity. She looked at the snow falling around them. She looked at the empty platform. She looked at the blind boy still holding onto her sleeve like she was something precious he did not want to lose. "Catherine Moore," she said finally, "I accept your offer." Jacob nodded once, then lifted her bag into the wagon without another word. Samuel climbed up onto the seat and held out his hand to help her. His fingers were warm and steady. As Catherine sat down beside him, the boy leaned close and whispered so only she could hear. "I prayed for you," he said with absolute certainty. "God sent you to us. I just know it." Before Catherine could respond, Jacob snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, rolling across the white prairie toward a future none of them could have predicted. Catherine watched the station disappear behind them. The snow fell harder now, covering everything in white, erasing her mistakes, erasing the path back. She did not know if this was fate or foolishness. She did not know if Samuel's faith was childish hope or divine truth. But as the wagon carried her deeper into the unknown, Catherine felt something strange stirring in her chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but the absence of despair. And for now, that was enough. The ranch house rose in the distance, large and solid against the gray sky. Dark wood and quiet windows. It looked expensive and unbearably cold, just like the man driving the wagon beside her. Catherine took a deep breath and prepared herself for whatever waited inside those walls. She had made a terrible mistake getting off at the wrong station. But something told her this mistake was about to change everything. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the ranch house, and Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. The building was impressive, she had to admit. 2 stories of dark timber and stone with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Smoke curled from one of 3 chimneys. But there was something wrong with it. Something she could not quite name. Then she realized what it was. The house looked like it had forgotten how to be lived in. Curtains drawn tight against every window. No wreath on the door. No candles in the windows, even though Christmas Eve was just hours away. The only decoration was a thin layer of ice creeping up the railings like frozen tears. Jacob climbed down from the wagon without a word. He lifted Catherine's carpet bag and walked toward the porch, clearly expecting her to follow. Samuel reached for her hand. "I will show you where everything is," he said proudly. "I know this whole house by heart." Catherine let him guide her up the steps. His small fingers traced the railing with practiced ease, counting each step under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The front door opened with a creak that echoed through the empty hallway beyond. Catherine stepped inside and felt the silence press against her like something physical. Her footsteps echoed across polished floors that had not heard laughter in a very long time. Jacob spoke only what was necessary. "Kitchen is through there. Pantry behind it. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right." He pointed to each location, then seemed to remember that his son could not see him pointing. "Samuel knows the way," he added gruffly. "I do," Samuel confirmed. He tugged Catherine's hand gently. "Come on. I will give you the tour." The boy moved through the house with confidence, fingers brushing walls and door frames. He knew every inch of this place, every corner and corridor. "This is the sitting room," Samuel announced. "We have a Christmas tree." Catherine looked through the doorway and saw the tree standing in the corner. It was carefully decorated with glass ornaments and paper stars. Candles waited on each branch, unlit. But something about it made her heart ache. It was beautiful and utterly lonely. "Papa put it up last week," Samuel said. "Mrs. Talbot helped before she left." "Mrs. Talbot, the housekeeper," Samuel explained. "She is nice, she makes good biscuits, but she wanted to see her grandchildren for Christmas." Catherine nodded, then caught herself. That was kind of her to help decorate before she left. Samuel's face fell slightly. "Papa does not really like Christmas anymore," he said quietly. "But I asked him, please, so he did it for me." Before Catherine could respond, Jacob appeared in the doorway. "Samuel, show Miss Moore the kitchen. There are instructions from Mrs. Talbot on the table." "Yes, Papa." The kitchen was large and well-equipped. A cast-iron stove dominated one wall, still warm from a morning fire. Copper pots hung from hooks above a sturdy wooden table. Everything was clean but tired-looking, like it had been functional for years without being truly cared for. On the table, papers lay neatly stacked. Catherine picked them up and scanned them quickly. Meal schedules, supply lists, instructions for working the stove, all written in a precise, careful hand. At the bottom of the last page, a final line caught her breath. "Mr. Hale is a good man carrying heavy grief. Samuel needs joy. Please try." Catherine read those words twice. Then she folded the papers and tucked them into her apron pocket. In the pantry, she found shelves stocked with flour and sugar, dried beans, and preserved vegetables. Enough for weeks if needed. And hanging on a hook near the door, a faded blue apron with the faint scent of lavender still clinging to the fabric. She reached for it without thinking. That was my wife's. Catherine spun around. Jacob stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. She pulled her hand back quickly. "I apologize. I did not mean to presume." Jacob stared at the apron for a long moment. Something shifted behind his eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. Then he nodded once. "You may wear it," he said quietly. "Eleanor would not want it going to waste." Before Catherine could thank him, he turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and slow. Samuel appeared at Catherine's side. "Papa does not talk about Mama much," he said softly. "But I remember her. She used to sing while she cooked." Catherine looked down at the blind boy. His face turned up toward her voice. "What do you remember most about her?" Samuel thought for a moment. "Her hands were always warm," he said finally. "And she smelled like lavender, like that apron." Catherine's throat tightened. She lifted the apron from its hook and tied it carefully around her waist. "Do you sing?" Samuel asked hopefully. "A little," Catherine admitted. The boy's face lit up. "Will you sing while we set the table? Please." Catherine took a deep breath. She had not sung in months. Not since her mother's funeral. Not since she had sold everything and bought that train ticket to a new life. But Samuel was looking at her with such hope, such innocent faith. "All right," she said gently. "What would you like to hear?" Samuel considered this seriously. Something about Christmas, he decided. Something soft. Catherine began to sing, "Silent Night." The words came slowly at first, rusty from disuse, but the melody found its way back to her, note by note. Samuel hummed along as he counted silverware by touch. 3 forks, 3 knives, 3 spoons. Halfway through the second verse, Jacob appeared in the doorway. He froze. His face went pale as death. His hands clenched at his sides. "That is enough," he said hoarsely. Then he vanished before Catherine could apologize. Samuel's hands stilled on the silverware. His small voice broke the silence. "That was Mama's favorite song," he whispered. Catherine closed her eyes. "Oh, Lord," she prayed silently, "what have I walked into?" That night, Catherine lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the house breathe around her. Footsteps paused outside Samuel's room down the hall. A low voice murmured. Then Samuel spoke clearly into the darkness, unaware that anyone else could hear. "Dear God," he prayed, "Papa is so lonely. He tries to hide it, but I can hear it in his voice. Please send us a mama for Christmas. Please. I promise I will be good forever. Amen." Catherine pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart break for this child and his wounded father. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if she could help heal this broken family. But she knew one thing for certain. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. The wrong station had led her to the right place. Now she just had to figure out what to do about it. Morning came gray and quiet. Catherine rose before dawn, dressing quickly in the cold room. Her breath made small clouds in the air. She splashed water on her face from the basin and tied her hair back simply. Then she reached for Eleanor's blue apron. The lavender scent had faded some, but it was still there. A ghost of the woman who had worn it before. Catherine wondered what Eleanor had been like. Warm, probably. Kind. The sort of woman who made a house feel like a home. The sort of woman Catherine had always wanted to be. She made her way downstairs, each step creaking softly beneath her feet. The house was still dark, curtains drawn against the weak winter sun. In the kitchen, she set water to boil and began mixing dough for biscuits. The familiar rhythm of cooking settled her nerves. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. By the time the first batch was in the oven, golden light was trying desperately to creep through the heavy curtains. Catherine walked to the window and hesitated. Mrs. Talbot's note echoed in her mind. "Samuel needs joy. Please try." She took a deep breath and pulled the curtains open. Sunlight poured into the kitchen like it had been waiting years for permission. Dust motes danced in the golden beams. The whole room seemed to exhale. "You opened the curtains." Catherine turned. Samuel stood in the doorway, his head tilted toward the light. His blind eyes could not see it, but he felt it on his skin. "Is that all right?" Catherine asked carefully. Samuel walked forward until he stood in the patch of sunlight. He turned his face up toward the warmth and smiled. "It feels like a hug," he said simply. Catherine's heart clenched. When was the last time someone had hugged this child? When was the last time anyone in this house had felt warmth that did not come from a fire? "Would you like to help me finish breakfast?" she asked. Samuel's face lit up. "Really? Mrs. Talbot never lets me help. She says I will break things." Catherine knelt down to his level, even though he could not see her face. "I do not believe that for a second. You have the steadiest hands I have ever seen." This was true. She had watched him set the table the night before, counting and placing each item with perfect precision. Samuel beamed. "What can I do? Can you count out 6 eggs from the basket?" Catherine pointed toward the counter, then caught herself. "The basket is on the counter to your left, about 3 steps." Samuel walked confidently to the spot, found the basket with practiced ease, and began carefully lifting eggs one by one. 1, 2, 3, he counted softly. Jacob appeared in the doorway just as Samuel reached 6. The rancher stopped short when he saw the open curtains. Light flooded the room, touching everything with gold. "You opened them," he said flatly. "I thought the kitchen could use some sunshine," Catherine replied calmly. "I hope that is all right." Jacob stared at the window for a long moment. Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or something deeper. Then his eyes fell on Samuel, standing in the sunlight with a smile on his face. The fight went out of him. "Fine," he said quietly, "just for today." He sat down heavily at the table and watched Catherine work without comment. She could feel his eyes on her, wary and watchful. But she could also see the way he looked at his son, the longing, the fear, the love he did not know how to express. After breakfast, Jacob disappeared outside. Through the newly opened window, Catherine watched him splitting wood behind the barn. Each swing of the axe was measured and controlled, like a man who had learned the hard way what happened when he lost control. "Papa works when he is sad," Samuel said beside her. Catherine looked down at him. "And what do you do when you are sad?" "I listen," Samuel answered thoughtfully. "People tell you more when they think you cannot see them." Catherine smiled at his wisdom. "You are very smart for 7 years old." "I am almost 8, Samuel corrected proudly. "My birthday is in February." "That is wonderful. We will have to do something special." Samuel's face fell slightly. "Papa forgot last year. He said he was sorry after, but I think he just forgot what day it was." Catherine's heart ached. She reached out and smoothed his hair gently. "Well, we will make sure he remembers this year." Samuel leaned into her touch like a flower turning toward the sun. "I like you," he said simply. "You make everything feel warmer." They spent the morning together. Catherine showed him how to knead bread dough, guiding his small hands through the rhythm until he found it himself. "Push, fold, turn," Samuel repeated. "Push, fold, turn." His face lit up with wonder when the dough began to change under his fingers. "It is moving," he said excitedly. "It feels alive." "It is alive," Catherine told him. "The yeast makes it grow, just like people grow when they are given what they need." "What do people need to grow?" Catherine thought about this carefully. "Love," she said finally. "Patience. Someone who believes in them." Samuel nodded seriously. "That is what Mama used to say. She said love was like bread. You have to work at it, but it feeds everyone. Your Mama sounds very wise." "She was," Samuel agreed. Then his voice dropped. "I miss her a lot. Papa does not talk about her much. I think it hurts him too much." "Sometimes," Catherine said gently, "people who love the deepest hurt the longest. Do you think Papa will ever stop hurting?" Samuel waited for her answer with such hope in his blind eyes. "I think," Catherine said slowly, "that hurt does not disappear. But I think it can make room for other things. For joy, for new love, for moments like this." Samuel smiled. "I like that answer." Jacob returned when the smell of fresh bread filled the house. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen and stood frozen. Catherine looked up and saw his face. He was staring at her like he had seen a ghost. She realized suddenly what he was seeing. A woman at his table, his son laughing. Warmth where there had only been cold, just like it must have been when Eleanor was alive. Jacob turned away sharply before either of them could speak. That afternoon, an older man arrived with a wagon full of firewood. He had weathered skin and kind eyes that had seen too much and forgiven most of it. "Name is Dutch," he said, tipping his hat to Catherine. "Been working this ranch longer than some of the fence posts." Catherine smiled. "Pleased to meet you, Dutch. I am Catherine Moore." Dutch nodded. "I heard." Jacob mentioned he found some help in town. He waited until Jacob had gone to unload the wood before lowering his voice. "You have stepped into deep water, miss," he said quietly. Catherine met his eyes. "I did not plan to. It just happened." Dutch sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "Jacob has not been the same since Eleanor died. Lost her in childbirth 3 winters back. Baby did not make it either. Catherine's hand went to her chest. Oh no. He blames himself, Dutch continued. Thinks if he had gotten the doctor sooner, or noticed something was wrong earlier. He has been punishing himself ever since. And Samuel? Dutch's weathered face softened. That boy's faith is the only thing keeping this place breathing. He prays every night for his papa to be happy again. Prays for a new mama to love them. Catherine thought of Samuel's prayer the night before. Dear God, Papa is so lonely. She thought of Jacob splitting wood like he was trying to kill something inside himself. She thought of the curtains she had opened, letting light into a house that had forgotten what warmth felt like. Maybe, Catherine said softly, some prayers are meant to be answered by ordinary people. Dutch looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled sadly. Maybe so, miss. Maybe so. That evening, supper passed in tense silence. Jacob ate mechanically, his eyes fixed on his plate. Catherine tried to make light conversation, but her words fell flat against his wall of quiet. Only Samuel seemed unaffected. He chattered happily about the bread they had made, about how the dough felt alive under his fingers, about how Catherine had let him count all the ingredients by himself. Jacob listened without responding. Finally, Samuel spoke the words that shattered the fragile peace. Papa, he said innocently, you are still sad. I can hear it in your voice. Jacob's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Samuel, he said tightly, that is not appropriate. But it is true, Samuel pressed on. He was not being cruel, he was simply stating what he knew. You do not laugh anymore. You used to laugh before Mama went to heaven. I remember. Jacob set down his fork with deliberate control. We are not discussing this. Catherine watched the exchange, her heart breaking for both of them. She could see the pain Jacob was trying to hide. She could see the confusion on Samuel's face. She spoke before she could stop herself. Sometimes, Catherine said gently, sadness is so loud that it drowns out everything else. Even love. Jacob's head snapped toward her. His eyes were burning. You do not know what you are talking about, he said coldly. I lost my father when I was 12, Catherine replied evenly. She did not flinch from his anger. I know exactly what grief does when it is allowed to rule a house. It turns everything cold. It makes people forget how to feel anything else. Jacob stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or resistance. Then he pushed back from the table and stood abruptly. I need air, he said flatly. The door slammed behind him. Samuel's lower lip trembled. Did I make Papa angry? Catherine moved to kneel beside his chair. She took his small hands in hers. No, sweetheart. You did not do anything wrong. You just said what was true. Sometimes the truth is hard for people to hear. But I want Papa to be happy, Samuel whispered. I pray for it every single night. I know you do. Catherine squeezed his hands gently. And I believe those prayers are working, even if we cannot see it yet. Samuel sniffled. Do you really think so? I really do. She helped him wash up for bed and walked him to his room. It was neat but bare with few decorations. On the nightstand lay a leather-bound book. What is this? Catherine asked, picking it up. My Braille primer, Samuel said. Papa tried to teach me, but he gets frustrated. He does not have the patience for it anymore. Would you like to try again? With me? Samuel's breath caught. Truly? You would teach me? Catherine opened the book and ran her fingers over the raised dots. I do not know Braille myself, she admitted. But we can learn together. Would you like that? Samuel threw his arms around her waist. Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you. She held him for a moment, this small, blind boy with more faith than anyone she had ever met. They spent an hour tracing raised dots, Catherine's fingers following his patiently. Samuel caught on quickly, his clever mind making connections faster than she expected. A, he said proudly, touching a pattern. And this is B, and this is C. You are a natural. Catherine told him. "Your mama would be so proud." Samuel beamed. "Do you think she can see me from heaven?" "I think," Catherine said carefully, "that the people we love never really leave us. They stay in our hearts, and I think your mama is watching over you every single day." Samuel nodded seriously. "That is what I think, too. And I think she sent you to us." Catherine did not know what to say to that, so she simply kissed his forehead and tucked him into bed. "Good night, Samuel." "Good night, Mama Catherine." The words hit her like a wave. She stood frozen in the doorway, tears pricking her eyes. Samuel was already half asleep, unaware of what he had said, unaware of how much it meant. Catherine slipped out of his room and leaned against the wall, trying to compose herself. That was when she saw Jacob standing at the end of the hall. He had heard everything. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Pain, understanding, fear. Then Jacob turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Catherine waited until he was gone before letting the tears fall. The next morning she found the courage to do something she had been avoiding. At the end of the upstairs hallway stood a door that had remained closed since she arrived. She had noticed Jacob steering around it, noticed how his eyes skipped over it like it did not exist. She knew what lay behind it. Catherine stood before the door for a long moment, her hand on the cold brass knob. She could walk away. She could respect Jacob's boundaries and leave this room sealed. But something drew her forward, something she could not explain. She turned the knob and pushed. The door creaked open slowly. Inside, the air was still and cold. Dust motes hung suspended in the weak light filtering through the drawn curtains. The bedroom was exactly as Eleanor must have left it. The bed neatly made with a faded quilt. A hairbrush on the vanity with strands of golden hair still caught in its bristles. A shawl folded carefully at the foot of the bed, lavender-colored and soft. Catherine did not touch anything. She simply stood there, acknowledging the life that had ended in this room, the love that had not. She understood now why Jacob could not enter here. This room was a shrine to everything he had lost. Coming here would mean facing that loss, accepting that Eleanor was never coming back. "I am sorry," Catherine whispered to the empty room. "I am sorry you did not get to see Samuel grow up. I am sorry your husband is so lost without you." She paused, then added something more. "But I promise you this. I will take care of them, for as long as they will let me. I will try to bring joy back into this house." Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Catherine turned to find Jacob standing in the doorway. His face was pale as death. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I needed to see," Catherine said simply. "I needed to understand." Jacob's jaw clenched. "This room is not yours to understand." "No, it is not." Catherine walked toward him slowly. "But I think Eleanor would want you to stop punishing yourself. I think she would want you to live again." "You did not know her," Jacob said through gritted teeth. "No. But I know love, and I know that love does not want the people it leaves behind to suffer forever." Jacob stared at her with burning eyes. For a moment, Catherine thought he might shout at her, throw her out of the house. Instead, his shoulders slumped, the fight drained out of him. "I cannot," he whispered. "I cannot let go." Catherine reached out and touched his arm gently. "You do not have to let go," she said softly. "You just have to make room." Jacob looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her face. Something shifted between them. Something neither of them was ready to name. Then Jacob pulled away and walked down the hall without another word. But Catherine noticed something. He left Eleanor's door open behind him. Christmas Eve arrived with the weight of snow and silence. Catherine woke before dawn, her heart heavy with the knowledge that tomorrow she was supposed to leave. Jacob had made that clear. 2 days of work, train fare north, a transaction. nothing more. But somewhere in the past 48 hours, everything had changed. She dressed quietly and made her way downstairs. The house was still dark, but she did not open the curtains this time. Some darkness, she was learning, needed to be respected. In the kitchen, she began preparing breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon, fresh biscuits, strong coffee. Samuel appeared first, his scarf still wrapped around his neck from the night before. "Is today Christmas Eve?" he asked hopefully. "It is," Catherine confirmed. Samuel's face fell. "That means tomorrow is Christmas. And then you leave." Catherine's hands stilled on the pot she was stirring. She did not know what to say. "I do not want you to go," Samuel whispered. She knelt down and pulled him into a hug. "I know, sweetheart. Can you not just stay? Forever?" Catherine's heart cracked. "I made a promise to someone else," she said gently. "A man in Silver Falls is waiting for me." "But you do not love him," Samuel said with startling certainty. "You told me you have never even met him." "That is true. But sometimes adults make promises they have to keep, even when things change." Samuel pulled back, his blind eyes somehow finding her face. "But what if God has a different promise for you? What if he sent you here on purpose?" Catherine could not answer. The question was too big, too true. Jacob entered the kitchen before the silence grew unbearable. He looked at them, Catherine kneeling on the floor, Samuel with tear tracks on his cheeks, and stopped. "What is going on?" he asked gruffly. "I do not want Catherine to leave," Samuel said before she could respond. "I prayed for her, Papa. God sent her to us." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Samuel, we talked about this. But it is true." Samuel's voice rose with desperation. "She makes everything better. She opened the curtains and taught me Braille and made bread with me, and she sang Mama's song, and the house feels alive again, Papa. Can you not feel it?" "That is enough," Jacob said sharply. Samuel's face crumpled. He turned and ran from the kitchen, his sobs echoing through the hallway. The silence left behind was deafening. Catherine rose slowly to her feet. She could feel anger building in her chest, hot and righteous. "Children do not forget love," she said quietly. "They remember every moment of it, every kindness and every cruelty." Jacob's eyes flashed. "You think I'm cruel?" "I think you are afraid, and I think you are letting your fear hurt your son." Jacob took a step toward her, his face dark with fury. "You have been here 2 days. 2 days! You do not get to tell me how to raise my child. Somebody has to," Catherine shot back. "Because right now you are teaching him that love leaves. You are teaching him that people who care will eventually abandon him. Is that really the lesson you want him to learn?" Jacob went pale. Catherine grabbed her shawl from the hook by the door. "I am going for a walk," she said tightly. "When I come back, you can decide whether you want my help for the rest of the day or if you would rather I leave tonight." She pushed past him and stepped out into the cold. The wind cut through her thin shawl like knives. Snow was falling steadily now, covering the world in white. Catherine walked without direction, her feet carrying her away from the house and its impossible tensions. She did not know how long she walked. Long enough for her fingers to go numb. Long enough for the tears on her cheeks to freeze. Finally she stopped, realizing she had reached a small clearing behind the barn. And there, half covered in snow, stood a simple wooden grave marker. Eleanor Hale, beloved wife and mother, with the angels now. Catherine stood before the grave, her breath making clouds in the air. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am sorry for barging into your life, into your husband and your son. I did not mean for any of this to happen." The wind answered with silence. "I think I love them," Catherine admitted, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "I know that is foolish. I have only known them 2 days. But Samuel, he has such faith, such light. And Jacob, underneath all that pain, I can see the man he used to be, the man you loved." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "I do not know what to do. I made a promise to go to Silver Falls, to marry a man I have never met. But when I think about leaving here, leaving them, it feels wrong." Catherine looked up at the gray sky. "If you can hear me, if you are watching over them like Samuel believes, please tell me what to do. Please show me the path." She stood there until the cold became unbearable. Then she turned and walked back toward the house. Through the falling snow, she saw a figure kneeling in front of the barn. Jacob. He was on his knees in the snow, shoulders shaking. Even from a distance, Catherine could see that he was crying. She stopped, not wanting to intrude. But she could not look away. Jacob wept like a man who had forgotten how. Great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. 3 years of grief and guilt and fear pouring out onto the frozen ground. Catherine watched, tears streaming down her own face. Then, without planning to, she walked forward. Jacob did not hear her approach until she was standing beside him. He looked up, his face raw with pain, and tried to pull himself together. "I am sorry," he choked out. "I do not, usually. I never—" Catherine knelt down in the snow beside him. "You do not have to apologize," she said softly. "Grief is not weakness." "I miss her so much," Jacob whispered. "Every single day. I wake up and for a moment I forget she's gone. And then I remember, and it is like losing her all over again." "I know," Catherine said. "I felt the same way when my father died, when my mother followed him." Jacob looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "How did you survive it?" "One day at a time," Catherine replied. "One breath at a time." And eventually, the good memories started to hurt less. They started to feel like gifts instead of wounds. Jacob shook his head. "I do not know if I can do that." "You can." Catherine reached out and took his cold hands in hers. "You have to, for Samuel's sake. That boy loves you more than anything in this world, and he needs his father to come back to life." Jacob stared at their joined hands. "She would have liked you," he said finally. "Eleanor. She would have said you were exactly what this house needed." Catherine smiled sadly. "I wish I could have met her." They knelt there in the snow, two broken people holding on to each other. Finally, Jacob spoke again. "I do not want you to leave," he said quietly. Catherine's heart stopped. "I know I said 2 days," Jacob continued. "I know this was supposed to be a transaction. But Samuel is right. The house feels different with you here. I feel different." He looked at her, his eyes full of fear and hope. "Stay for Christmas," he said. "Please. And then we can figure out the rest." Catherine thought of Silver Falls, of the man she had never met, of the life she had planned so carefully. Then she thought of Samuel's smile, of Jacob's grief, of the way this broken family had somehow started to feel like home. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." Jacob's face transformed. The relief there was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," he whispered. They rose together, still holding hands. As they walked back toward the house, the snow began to fall harder, but for the first time in 3 years, Jacob Hale did not feel cold. That night, the house felt different. Catherine could not explain it. The walls were the same. The furniture had not moved. But something in the air had shifted, like a long-held breath finally released. She found Samuel curled up in the sitting room, his back against the Christmas tree, his fingers tracing the ornaments. "May I join you?" she asked softly. Samuel's face lit up. "Yes, please." Catherine sat down beside him. The tree glowed with candlelight now, Jacob having lit them before dinner. The flames flickered gently, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Papa said you are staying for Christmas," Samuel said. He sounded afraid to believe it. "I am. And after Christmas?" Catherine hesitated. "We are taking it one day at a time," she said carefully. Samuel nodded seriously. "That is what Mama used to say, 1 day at a time and let God handle the rest. Your Mama was very wise." She was. Samuel reached out and found Catherine's hand. She squeezed it gently. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the candles flicker. Then Samuel spoke again. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." Sometimes I think God took Mama because he needed her more than we did. Samuel's voice was small and wondering. Like maybe she had an important job to do in heaven. Does that make sense? Catherine's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. That makes perfect sense. And I think, Samuel continued, that he sent you to help us while she is busy up there. Like a substitute, not to replace her, just to help. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She pulled Samuel close and held him tight. You are the most remarkable child I have ever met, she whispered. Samuel hugged her back fiercely. Footsteps in the doorway made them both look up. Jacob stood there, watching them. His expression was unreadable. It is getting late, he said gruffly. Samuel should be in bed. Samuel groaned. But Papa, it is Christmas Eve. Exactly. And Santa only comes when children are sleeping. Samuel's face lit up. Santa is real? Jacob blinked, caught off guard. Of course he is. Mrs. Talbot told me he was just a story for babies, Samuel said suspiciously. Jacob knelt down in front of his son. Mrs. Talbot was wrong, he said firmly. Santa is as real as anything worth believing in. Samuel considered this. Like God? Like God? And like Mama watching over us? Jacob swallowed hard. Yes, he said quietly. Like Mama watching over us. Samuel threw his arms around his father's neck. I love you, Papa. Jacob closed his eyes and held his son. I love you too, he whispered. More than anything. Catherine watched them, her heart so full it ached. This was family. This was love. This was everything she had spent her whole life searching for. She rose quietly, not wanting to intrude on the moment. Catherine, Samuel called out. Yes, sweetheart. Will you come say good night after Papa tucks me in? She smiled. I would not miss it. After Samuel was in bed and sleeping soundly, Catherine found Jacob in the sitting room standing before the tree. He was holding something small in his hands. This was Eleanor's, he said without turning around. She carved it herself. The first Christmas we were married. Catherine stepped closer and saw what he held. A small wooden angel, lovingly crafted if imperfect. It is beautiful, she said softly. Jacob turned the angel over in his hands. She made one for every year we were together. 4 angels total. This was the last one. His voice broke on the words. Catherine moved to stand beside him. May I see it? He handed it to her. The wood was smooth from years of handling, warm from his skin. She carved it the week before Samuel was born, Jacob continued. Said it would be his guardian angel, to watch over him when she could not be there. Tears slipped down Catherine's cheeks. Jacob, she said softly. She's still watching over him. I truly believe that. He looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. I am starting to believe it too, he admitted. They stood there together, surrounded by candlelight and memory. Then Jacob did something that surprised them both. He reached out and took Catherine's hand. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. For Samuel. For making me remember what it feels like to hope again. Catherine intertwined her fingers with his. You do not have to thank me. Yes, I do. Jacob turned to face her fully. I have been dead inside for 3 years. Walking around, doing the work, going through the motions. But not really living. Not really feeling anything except pain. He paused, gathering courage. And then you stepped off that train. At the wrong station. With nothing but a carpet bag and a letter to a man you had never met. And somehow, impossibly, you brought light back into this house. Catherine's heart was pounding. Jacob, let me finish, he squeezed her hand. I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other. I know there is a man in Silver Falls who is expecting you. He took a deep breath. But I am asking you, Catherine Moore. Do not go. Do not leave us. Stay here. Stay with Samuel. Stay with me. Not as help or as an employee, as family. Catherine stared at him, unable to speak. I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give, Jacob continued quickly. "I am not asking you to love me. I am just asking for a chance. A chance to see what this could become." The silence stretched between them. Then Catherine smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will stay." Jacob's face transformed. Hope, relief, joy, all tangled together. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. Outside, snow fell softly on a house that had finally remembered how to breathe. And in his bedroom, Samuel smiled in his sleep. His prayers had been answered. Christmas morning arrived without ceremony. No bells, no shouting joy, just quiet light slipping through newly opened curtains and the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. Catherine woke to the sound of footsteps racing down the hall. Samuel burst into her room without knocking, breathless and laughing. "You are still here," he said, as if saying it made it true again. "I am," Catherine answered, sitting up. Samuel flung himself onto the bed and wrapped his arms around her. "Forever," he said hopefully. Catherine smoothed his hair. "One day at a time," she reminded him gently. "But today, yes. I am here today." That seemed to satisfy him. He pulled back, grinning from ear to ear. "It is Christmas," he announced. "Papa is making pancakes." "Pancakes?" "He said it is a Christmas tradition, from when he was little." Catherine smiled. "Then we had better go help him." They made their way downstairs together, Samuel's hand in hers. In the kitchen, Jacob stood at the stove, looking completely out of his depth. Flour dusted his shirt. Batter dripped from a spoon onto the floor. Smoke was starting to rise from the pan. "I think I may have overestimated my abilities," he admitted when he saw Catherine. She laughed and gently took the spatula from his hand. "Why do you not pour coffee while I rescue these?" Jacob stepped back gratefully. "Samuel, set the table, please." "Yes, Papa." They moved around each other carefully, like three people learning a new dance. There were awkward pauses and bumped elbows, but there was also laughter, real, honest laughter. After breakfast, they gathered in the sitting room. The tree sparkled with candlelight. 3 stockings hung from the mantel. Catherine did not know when her stocking had appeared, but there it was. Plain wool, slightly crooked, clearly hastily made. "Samuel made it," Jacob explained, catching her look, "last night. He wanted you to have one." Catherine pressed her hand to her heart. "It is perfect." Samuel beamed. "I asked Papa what color you like, and he said blue. So I used blue yarn. Is it really blue? It is really blue. The most beautiful blue I have ever seen. They exchanged small gifts, nothing elaborate. There had been no time for shopping. Jacob gave Samuel a carved wooden horse. "I made it myself," he admitted. "It is not very good." Samuel ran his fingers over every inch of it. "It is perfect, Papa. I can feel the mane and the tail and everything." For Catherine, Jacob had found a small book of poetry in Eleanor's things. "She would want you to have it," he said quietly. She loved these poems. Catherine opened it with trembling hands. On the first page, in faded ink, Eleanor had written her name, Eleanor Jane Hale, Christmas, 1872. "Thank you," Catherine whispered. "I will treasure it." Then it was Catherine's turn. She handed Jacob a small package wrapped in brown paper. He opened it carefully. Inside was the scarf she had been secretly knitting for Samuel, and something else, a piece of paper with careful handwriting. "It is a letter," she explained, "from me to you, about the future I want for us, for all 3 of us." Jacob read the letter silently. His eyes grew brighter with each line. When he finished, he looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. "You mean this," he said. "Every word. Every single one." Samuel tugged at her sleeve. "What does it say?" Catherine smiled. "It says that I want to stay. Not just for Christmas. Not just for a week or a month. But for good. It says that I want to be part of this family. If you will have me." Samuel's face lit up like the sun. "Really? Forever and ever? Forever and ever?" Samuel threw his arms around both of them, pulling them into a clumsy three-way hug. "I knew it," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I knew God would answer my prayers. I knew it." Jacob met Catherine's eyes over Samuel's head. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. She smiled and mouthed back, "Thank you for asking me to stay." They spent the rest of Christmas morning in quiet celebration. Dutch arrived near noon with a ham and more firewood. He took one look at the three of them sitting together by the fire and grinned. "About time," he said gruffly. "This house has been waiting for joy to come back." Dinner stretched long and easy. Stories replaced silence. Laughter found its way back into the walls. Samuel talked freely, his joy no longer something he feared losing. That evening, as dusk settled over the ranch, Jacob found Catherine on the porch. Snow fell soft and steady, covering the world in white. "I have something to ask you," he said. Catherine turned to face him. Jacob took a deep breath. "I know this is fast. I know we should wait. But life has taught me that waiting does not always give you more time. Sometimes it just gives you more regret." He took her hands in his. "Catherine Moore, will you marry me? Not today, not tomorrow, but someday when we are ready. Will you be my wife?" Catherine looked at this man who had been so broken, who had closed himself off from love, who was now standing before her with his heart in his hands. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Jacob, I will marry you." He pulled her close and kissed her gently. In his bedroom window, Samuel pressed his face against the cold glass, unable to see but somehow knowing. "Thank you, God," he whispered. "You did it. You really did it." The weeks following Christmas passed gently, like water smoothing stone. Catherine wrote to Henry Dawson in Silver Falls. She was honest and humble. She explained that circumstances had changed, that she had found something unexpected, that she hoped he would understand. His reply came quickly, kind and gracious. "I have found another bride," he wrote, "a widow from the next county. I wish you every happiness in your new life." The knot in Catherine's chest loosened when she read those words. She was free. Life at the ranch settled into rhythm. Curtains stayed open. Bread baked daily. Samuel learned his letters with fierce focus, his clever fingers racing across the Braille primer. Jacob joined them at the table each morning, his large hands clumsy but determined as he helped with the lessons. One evening, Samuel traced a word slowly. "Love," he read aloud. Jacob smiled. "You are getting good. That is because Mama is a good teacher." The word landed softly and stayed. Nobody corrected him. Nobody explained that Catherine was not really his mother, because in all the ways that mattered, she was. Winter loosened its grip. Snow melted into mud. Streams sang louder as ice broke apart. The land itself seemed relieved. One afternoon, Catherine walked the fields with Jacob. Samuel ran ahead of them, stick in hand, tapping the ground to find his way. "I used to think strength meant standing alone," Jacob said quietly, "carrying everything myself, never asking for help." Catherine slipped her hand into his. "And now? Now I know strength means letting others hold you up when you cannot stand." They watched Samuel exploring the fence line, his face bright with wonder at the sounds of spring. "He is happy," Catherine said. "He is," Jacob agreed, "and so am I." The wedding took place on a mild April afternoon. The ceremony was small, quiet, honest. Just family and a few neighbors. Dutch stood as witness. The preacher spoke words that had been spoken 1,000 times before but felt brand new. "Do you, Jacob, take Catherine to be your wife?" "I do." "Do you, Catherine, take Jacob to be your husband?" "I do." Samuel stood between them, holding both their hands. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, he cheered so loud the whole valley must have heard. The months that followed were not perfect. Grace is what they called it when the hard times came, when Jacob's grief flared unexpectedly, when Catherine's patience wore thin, when Samuel had bad days and the world felt too big and too dark. But they faced it together, talking when they needed to, silent when words were not enough. always reaching for each other in the night. Summer brought news that changed everything. Catherine felt it first, a familiar ache, a new awareness. She told Jacob on a warm evening in June, standing by Eleanor's grave. He visited there often now, not to mourn, but to remember. "I am pregnant," Catherine said. Jacob went very still. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be." He stared at her for a long moment. Then his face broke into a smile so wide it seemed to crack open all the grief he had been carrying. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are having a baby." When they told Samuel, he clapped his hands and jumped up and down. "I knew it," he shouted. "I knew God was not done yet." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Catherine bloomed as summer turned to fall. The house filled with preparations, a cradle that Jacob built himself, sturdy and true. In the quiet evenings, Samuel would press his ear to Catherine's belly and wait for the baby to kick. "She is strong," he would report. "She is going to be amazing." "How do you know it is a girl?" Catherine asked. "I just know," Samuel said confidently. "The same way I knew you were coming." No one argued with him. The baby arrived on a quiet morning in late September. No storm, no drama, just steady breath and waiting hearts. Catherine labored in the bedroom that had once belonged to Eleanor, the room that had been sealed by grief for 3 years. Now its windows stood open, sunlight streaming across the floorboards. Jacob stayed by her side, fear flickering in his eyes, but no longer in control. "You are doing fine," he whispered over and over, as much for himself as for her. Down the hall, Samuel sat with Dutch, hands folded tight in his lap. He did not cry. He listened. When the baby's first wail filled the house, Samuel leaped to his feet so fast his chair tipped over. "That is her," he said breathlessly. "That is my sister." They named her Grace. It seemed fitting. After everything they had been through, Grace was exactly what had saved them. Samuel met his sister carefully, touching her tiny hand with reverence. "She is warm," he said softly. "Like Mama Catherine. Like bread." Jacob laughed and cried at the same time. "She is perfect," he whispered, kissing Catherine's forehead. "You both are." That night, as the family slept peacefully for the first time in years, the house settled around them. It had been empty once, cold and silent and full of ghosts. Now it was alive, breathing and warm and filled with love. All because a woman stepped off at the wrong station. All because a blind boy never stopped believing. All because sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the greatest miracles. Years passed like water over stones, smoothing edges, revealing beauty. Samuel grew tall and strong. His blindness never held him back. He learned to read fluently, his fingers flying across raised letters. He learned to ride with Dutch's patient guidance. He learned to navigate the ranch so well that visitors forgot he could not see. His faith never wavered. Every night he prayed, not asking for things anymore, mostly giving thanks. "Thank you, God," he would say, "for Papa and Mama Catherine, for Grace, for our family, for the wrong station." Grace grew wild and bright. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's kind eyes. From the moment she could walk, she followed Samuel everywhere, her small hand in his. She became his eyes in many ways, and he became her anchor. Jacob changed most of all. The grief never disappeared completely. Some mornings, Catherine would find him standing at Eleanor's grave, talking softly to the stone. But now the conversations were different. "She is walking now," he would say. "Grace took her first steps yesterday. You would be so proud." Or, "Samuel read a whole book out loud last night. His mama taught him. She would have loved you, Eleanor. I know you sent her to us." He no longer ran from the pain. He let it live alongside the joy. That was what healing looked like, Catherine learned. Not the absence of sorrow, but the presence of love strong enough to hold it. The ranch prospered under Jacob's renewed attention. He hired more hands, expanded the herd, built a new barn that Dutch declared the finest in 3 counties. But more important than any of that, he was present. He ate breakfast with his family every morning. He helped with homework in the evenings. He told bedtime stories that grew more elaborate each night. And every Sunday, without fail, he took his family to church. Not because he had found religion exactly, but because Samuel's faith had showed him something worth believing in. One autumn evening, when Samuel was 16 and Grace was 7, the family gathered by the fire after dinner. "Mama," Grace said, climbing into Catherine's lap, "tell me the story again." "Which story, sweetheart?" "You know which one. The wrong station story." Catherine smiled and looked at Jacob. He nodded, his eyes warm. "All right," Catherine said. "Once upon a time, there was a woman named Catherine who thought she knew exactly where her life was supposed to go. She had it all planned out," Samuel added, settling into his chair. "A man named Henry in a town called Silver Falls." "Right," Catherine continued, "but God had a different plan." And one snowy day, Catherine stepped off the train at the wrong station. "She must have been scared," Grace said. "She was terrified," Catherine agreed. "But then she met a man and his son, a rancher named Jacob and a little boy named Samuel." "That is Papa and Samuel," Grace said happily. "That is right." And Samuel, even though he could not see with his eyes, could see with his heart. He knew right away that Catherine was supposed to be part of their family. "I prayed for her," Samuel said quietly, "every single night, and God sent her." Grace snuggled closer to Catherine. "And then you married Papa and had me." "Eventually, yes. But first, there was a lot of learning. Learning to trust, learning to heal, learning that love does not mean forgetting the people we have lost. It means making room in our hearts for more." "And Mama Eleanor watches over us from heaven," Grace added. "Samuel says so." "I do," Samuel confirmed. "I always have." Jacob reached over and took Catherine's hand. "What is the moral of the story?" he asked his daughter. Grace thought very hard. "That sometimes getting lost is how you find home?" Jacob smiled. "That is exactly right." They sat together as the fire crackled and the night settled around them. 4 people, 2 living, 1 in heaven, 1 a memory that would never fade. But all of them, somehow, family. 20 years after the wrong station, Catherine stood on the same platform where her life had changed forever. Whitmore looked different now. The station had been rebuilt, bright and clean. The town had grown. New buildings lined the main street. But the view was the same. Snow falling soft and steady, the road stretching south toward the ranch. Mama. Catherine turned to find Grace walking toward her. 27 years old now, tall and beautiful, with her father's stubborn chin. "Are you all right?" Grace asked. "You have been standing here for 10 minutes. "Just remembering," Catherine said. Grace stood beside her mother and looked out at the snow. "This is where it all started," she said softly. "Right here, Christmas Eve, 1872. I stepped off that train and thought my whole life was ruined. And instead, you found us." Catherine smiled. "Instead, I found everything." They walked arm in arm back to the wagon where Jacob was waiting. He was older now, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes, but still strong, still steady. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Ready." The ranch house came into view just as the sun began to set. Golden light spilled across the snow, painting everything in shades of warmth. Samuel was on the porch, his own wife beside him, their 2 children racing across the yard. "Grandma," the eldest shouted. "Grandpa, you are back!" Jacob climbed down from the wagon and scooped both grandchildren into his arms. Catherine watched them, her heart so full it ached. All of this joy and love and life, all of it had grown from one mistake. One wrong step off a train, one blind boy who never stopped believing, one man brave enough to love again. That night, after the grandchildren were in bed and the house was quiet, Jacob found Catherine in the sitting room. The Christmas tree stood in its usual spot, 50 years of ornaments now, angels that Eleanor had carved, stars that Samuel had made by touch, Painted decorations from Grace and her children, each one a memory, each one a piece of their story. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked, sitting beside her. "Everything," Catherine said. "The whole journey, how scared I was that first night, how certain I was that everything was lost." Jacob took her hand, the same hand he had been reaching for 20 years. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Not going to Silver Falls?" Catherine laughed softly. "Not for a single moment." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the candlelight flicker. "I love you," Jacob said. "Have I told you that recently?" "Only about 100 times today." "Good. I want to make sure you know." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I know," she said. "I have always known." Outside, snow continued to fall, soft and steady and beautiful. Inside, a house that had once forgotten how to breathe was filled with life and love and laughter. Samuel's children slept peacefully upstairs. Grace hummed softly in the kitchen. Dutch, old but still spry, snored gently by the fire. And in the sitting room, two people who had found each other against all odds held hands and watched the snow. "Do you remember what Samuel said?" Catherine asked. "The day we met? He said you sounded warm, like bread." Catherine smiled. "He also said, 'God sent me,' that he prayed for me." "He was right," Jacob said. "He was right about everything." In his bedroom, Samuel woke briefly. He could hear his parents talking downstairs, could hear the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of his children breathing. "Thank you, God," he whispered into the darkness, "for everything." Then he smiled and went back to sleep. Because sometimes the right life begins with the wrong step. Sometimes missing your train is the miracle. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, the biggest mistake of your life leads you exactly where you were always meant to be. Home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.